Sweet. Thanks, mate. So yeah, like I said, I'm Abby, based in the office in Auckland, and the OMV campaign was, to be honest, as part of the mobilization and actions team, the main campaign I worked on all year last year. And no, it started prior to 2019, and of course there's stuff that happened with the OMV work, not only Greenpeace wise, but more specifically groups around the country in 2020. I just focused on 2019 for this presentation because that was for Greenpeace New Zealand our priority campaign. And I put together this presentation for another talk I was doing, and then we realized it would be quite good to share it with all of you because you all were an integral part of the OMV campaign last year. So who better to go back and share the full story with than the activists that actually participated in it last year. So I've got a bit of a presentation. I'm going to do a share screen thing here. So just shout at me or raise your hand if it's not working, if you can't see what I pull up. And we'll put it into presentation mode. And also to say, there's no way that this is everything. There's so much that happened last year. And so if there's something in particular that you would like to add to what I'm saying that you think is being missed, by all means, feel free, like Logie said, raise your hand in the chat group and share it, because there's heaps, I'm sure, that didn't actually get incorporated in this presentation. But what this presentation is the bits and pieces in terms of the activism and mobilization aspects, but also kind of the bigger picture in terms of how we approached the OMV campaign going into 2019 and how we were thinking through the process of how we could engage supporters and activists and mobilize people and get folks inspired to be a part of the campaign, so that come the end of 2019, when we knew we wanted to do something quite big, that we'd have lots of folks rallied to do so. So this incorporates different emails to supporters and all sorts of different approaches that we use to keep telling the story with everybody. But before I go into OMV work last year specifically, I'm sure you all remember TAITU. It was a boat that you all bought back in 2017, right, Logie? I think it was 2017. And there were quite a few learnings from that had an impact on and influenced what we decided to do with OMV in 2019. So I thought I'd highlight them because they were good things for us to have realized going into it. And one thing was that it really helps to engage people in the story early on. You know, you all are quite familiar with historical Greenpeace actions, in that oftentimes it'll be a super secret squirrel thing, and then all of a sudden people are hanging from a building or climbing up on a ship or one thing or another. And while there's always going to be a time and place for that kind of activity, there's also a massive benefit to telling a longer story and opening up the secrecy a bit so that you can bring people along with you. And so we had done that with TAITU when Kate, the climate campaigner at the time, took one of the Greenpeace rigs out to the Amazon warrior that was doing the seismic testing and radioed the captain and said, you know, I'm messaging you on behalf of tens of thousands of New Zealanders that don't want you doing seismic testing for drilling in our waters. And then went back to shore, and we went out to supporters and said, well, we want to go back and confront this big seismic testing vessel again, but we're going to need a bigger boat. And that's when we went out to supporters and said, will you help us buy a bigger boat so we can go back and confront this big beast? And you all helped us buy a boat. You named it. And then we went back, and 3 activists, including Russell, jumped in front of the seismic testing vessel to steer it off course. So yeah, so engaging people early on, opening up the secrecy a little bit, and having that also gave us lots of different opportunities to ask people to get involved in different ways, whether it was helping us name the boat or providing some financial donations to buy it, or actually being one of the activists to go out there and confront the big beast. There are lots of different ways in which people could get involved. But another thing that we learned from that experience was we put so much energy into that 2 to 3 months of building up to that moment when Russell was jumping in the water that we didn't really think about what the story was going to be like after he came out of the water. And it meant that we had this big lull in how we communicated to our supporters and all of you about what we were doing next. And you lose people when you don't keep the story going. So we realized that going into 2019, we needed to find a way to keep that OMV story going throughout the whole year. So one of the first things we did as an opportunity to get people involved in the story was launching petitions, and we had a couple different versions. So we had the Make OMV History Evict OMV petition. But the truth was that a lot of people didn't know who OMV were yet. I had no idea that OMV existed until we were campaigning on them at Greenpeace. So there's no way we could have expected most New Zealanders to know who they were. They're not a household name like Exxon or BP or Z. But there were quite a few people that were really engaged in the climate work that did kind of make that transition and know who they were. So they had signed that Evict OMV petition. But we needed to have a more general one so that we could also reach an audience that wasn't going to take any notice to an email that said OMV because they didn't know who they were. And that's why we launched the Let's Make Oil History petition. And we tied in the people versus oil wording, which you all saw throughout all of last year, because that's one of the Greenpeace global slogans used for the oil campaign. And that also meant that it gave it global relevance and could be used for messaging outside of New Zealand as well. So one of the very first things that we knew we needed to do was to get a whole bunch of people motivated, inspired, and trained up to become a part of a big mobilization later on in the year. So we launched the sign-up process, the recruitment process for peaceful civil disobedience trainings that we wanted to conduct around the country. It was the first time that we ever opened it up. Historically, again, it's been kind of not a secret process, but more of a kind of, you know, somebody at Greenpeace and then you get invited to a 3-day training in our warehouse. And we wanted to be a lot more inclusive this time. That's quite a big barrier for people to get to that stage. And it just means that we miss a lot of people that would potentially want to get involved in peaceful civil disobedience when we don't actually open it up transparently like this to invite people. So we launched a recruitment form online, sent out emails, and invited anybody who wanted to come, contacted all of our allies and said, hey, this training is going on, share it with your networks, and we'll let you know when we've got a date near you. The other thing that was happening kind of around that time, this follows the calendar year, is that the EPA was calling for submissions in regards to OMV's request to drill in the Great South Basin. And we decided that was also a good opportunity to represent our supporters down at that hearing later on in the year in Dunedin. And kind of historically, when we ask people to enter and write submissions, and a lot of allied groups are doing it already. For instance, Oil Free Otago had quite a few activists down there, and environmental justice and stuff. So it was an opportunity to support those groups too. So we put out a call to supporters to say, send a submission to EPA. Yeah, so we had 6 peaceful civil disobedience trainings for the year. We started in Auckland with our pilot session, went to Taranaki, Wellington, Dunedin, Christchurch, and then circled back up to Auckland again. And we were really stoked that not only people from across the movement with all of a whole bunch of different groups like Extinction Rebellion and Student Strikers and 350 and Climate Justice Taranaki and local oil free groups joined, but also that we saw Greenpeace supporters that had been really scared to do something like that, that they considered quite a bit more confrontational, but showed up to one of the trainings. And there were some really cute and lovely stories that came out of people's participation. A couple of my favorites were an older gentleman in Auckland who came up to us afterwards and said that we had alleviated his anxieties about getting involved in something like that because he's an oldie, which was the way he described himself, and therefore felt like before that day it wasn't something that was available to him. And another really beautiful story was a woman in Taranaki who was quite nervous and shy about getting involved, but also was really interested not only for herself, but in getting her 15-year-old son involved and upskilled, because he wanted to be a rioter when he grew up. And she wanted to show him that there were more peaceful ways to create global change. And he was a lovely, lovely teenager, came up and gave me a big hug afterwards. So I don't think there's a violent bone in his body, truth be told. But it was just really beautiful to see across the country, not only parents coming, but bringing their kids as well to get involved. So we had children of various ages that attended different trainings. We also realized early on in the year that we needed to have a slogan that would be relevant throughout the course of the year, and wanted to try something a bit different. I'm sure you all have seen dozens and dozens and dozens of yellow Greenpeace banners with black letters, and we wanted to steer as far away from that as we possibly could. If you went to the Peaceful Civil Disobedience training and attended the session on how to behave during peaceful civil disobedience, you probably heard this fact, but Greenpeace initially started doing yellow banners with green letters because that was what stood out best in black and white newspaper print. So that just goes to show you how old that color scheme was. So yeah, we really wanted to change it up. We also wanted to have a slogan, a logo that represented the tone of the movement, and people like Extinction Rebellion and student strikers that had really brought a different kind of colorful side. We needed to recognize that that's kind of where the tone was, and evolve with the way the movement was evolving. So we came up with the OMV GTFO and used the people versus oil again to make it globally relevant, and had lots of bright colors. And what we did was we emailed supporters to say, we've got these iron-ons that you can request and put on your own t-shirt, and then show up to events later on in the year wearing your t-shirt. And we, I think, we had like 850 or 800 made, and they just went like hotcakes. So we were like, well, we want to be able to have more, but we don't have the budget to do it. So how can we do it? We had one of our amazing volunteers who had done a t-shirt screen for us during the Rainbow Warrior Tour in 2018. Make another screen for us so that we could take it around the country with us when we went to facilitate the trainings, and screen print people's upcycled shirts for them. So it meant that we got hundreds more out there. It was awesome. And we specifically left it on Greenpeace branded so that people felt like they could wear it at different events, and that they didn't have to have Greenpeace, but that there was still like this consistency and this solidarity, and that everybody was wearing that same logo. So we also invited people to take pictures of themselves wearing their shirts and retweet them and tag OMV, etc. And here's some pictures from the Peaceful Civil Disobedience trainings. The one, actually, I think these are all from Wellington. There, making some t-shirts. And this is the email, or a snippet of the email rather, that went out to people inviting them to sign on to the Greenpeace submission to the EPA in regards to OMV's request to drill Great South Basin. And you might all be aware of this, but the EPA had already said that you couldn't bring up climate change as a reasoning as to why, an argument as to why they should turn down this request for consent. And so we were all really aware of that, but it was still a really awesome opportunity to just show that there was a lot of opposition, even if technically you weren't supposed to reference climate change as the reason why they should be given consent, which is ridiculous that you can't cite climate change when an oil company wants to drill. But nevertheless, them the rules. And then here's just an example of some different subject headings we used when the COSL prospector the oil rig that OMV ultimately used arrived in New Zealand waters. So we'll oftentimes try, when we send out emails, we'll do lots of A/B testing and send out different subject headings, etc., to see which ones work best. And so these are some examples of ones that we used. So calling the oil rig the four-legged beast, the new baddie in town, monster, monstrous machine, etc. So really making sure that people knew that it was the bad guy. And this is the email that went out as well and invited everybody to sign on to the Evict OMV petition if they had not done that. And there's a video that we made, which I'll show you in a moment. I don't know if you all would have seen it, maybe you have. But one of the things we did as well when the rig arrived is we went out actually in a helicopter and got photos of it. Because it was so far offshore, we wanted to make sure that people had a visual of what it looked like. It also meant that we had photos that the media could use every time they wanted to talk about OMV, and that was really helpful in telling the story. So we went out and got these images of it. And here is the video that Amanda narrated. Can everybody see YouTube? Great.
What's that on the horizon? Yikes! A gigantic flipping oil rig heading straight for New Zealand. Just when you thought we'd banned this nonsense.
We'll no longer be granting any new offshore oil and gas exploration.
That ban didn't cover existing permits, including Austrian company OMV, responsible for this self-propelled monster, the length of a rugby field, 12 stories high. It's traveled halfway around the world to get here. Having quit the oil fields of is already close to our shores, chugging along spookily under its own power. But hold your horses. Didn't Jacinda just say,
this is my generation's nuclear-free moment?
Which makes this site, an oil rig destined to drill off Taranaki and the Great South Basin, a 34,000-ton embarrassment for the government. If we want to survive, to keep global heating under 1.5 degrees, we cannot consume the fossil fuels we already know about, let alone look for more. We're calling on you to get involved. Sign OMV's eviction notice and sign up for a workshop. Learn the art of peaceful civil disobedience. Tell OMV and the government, WTF.
What the flip were you thinking?
Cool. So we made that video so that we could tell the story of the rig and its arrival in New Zealand, even though people couldn't see it for themselves. And then this is an email that went out letting people know that the rig was here, and we invited them to go to OMV's Facebook page and do things like give them a horrible review and leave them a message. There is a lot of power in kind of destroying a company's social license. There are oftentimes people at companies whose sole job it is to kind of get a read on the tone in terms of how well a brand is doing. And so if you're doing things like tweeting at a company, making lots of posts, etc., it can be really influential in terms of negatively impacting their social license, which we wanted to do. We wanted them to know that they weren't welcome to drill here in New Zealand. And we also invited people to Twitter. So that was the email inviting people to do those two things. And then we got to July, and that's when Nick and I did the climb at the OMV building in Wellington, the Majestic Center. So we had a couple key goals for this climb. One was to get more people to understand who OMV are. And that's why we chose to do something that we knew was going to take the whole day, and that had different messages that would be released throughout the course of the day, because we wanted the story to continue to unfold, therefore keeping people and the media engaged so that we would ultimately, by the end of the day, hopefully have engaged more people and increased their knowledge of OMV. The second, another big objective was to invite people to a mobilization opportunity. So to be able to say, this is OMV, they're New Zealand's last international bad oil company wanting to drill here, help us send them home. So at the floor where the OMV offices are located, Nick took a water paint pen and wrote on the window of their office to say, everybody join us back here on the 14th of August, which was a few weeks later, and help us hand in OMV's eviction notice. So a couple things that we did to keep people engaged throughout the course of the day is we had a live stream through the whole time. It was the first time we'd done something like that, so I had like a little GoPro on top of my helmet, but we also had some comms folks that were filming from afar. And all told, people's average watch time was 11 minutes, and we had about 10,400 overall viewers who altogether watched a total of 114,000 minutes, which is quite unheard of in terms of people's attention span watching live streams. So we were quite stoked on that. And we also saw a big spike on Google in terms of people just Googling OMV. So we felt like we achieved all those objectives quite well. And these are some photos from below. So Amanda was down on the street doing live interviews with folks like student strikers and Mike Smith and people in the public, and they were getting quite a bit of footage of what people's reactions were down there as well. And then a couple of things we did. So we has started last year doing more SMSs, texting folks. And there's lots of different ways that you could do it. With the climb, what we did is we texted people during the climb, inviting them to donate $3 and sign on to the petition. And then it means that they get follow-up communication from our in-house telefundraising team. And for folks that didn't get it during the climb, we sent, or I sent technically, not technically, but in my name, sent a text to folks inviting them to donate and to sign the petition again. So we live in an age where reality is people aren't checking their emails on their computers all the time, but people are on their phones all the time. So it makes heaps of sense to contact people that way and not rely on email always. And then this is a snippet from an email appeal that was sent out, inviting people to donate to support the campaign against OMV. And so it had some text from me in it, talking about the climb and what my feelings were and the reasons for doing it, etc. And after that, we did a Culture Jam postering activity, which a lot of you probably participated in, if not all of you. So Greenpeace has these days globally called Global Days of Action, and those days are days in which they encourage as many NROs as possible around the world to do an activity on the same day. New Zealand, because of the time zone that we're in, oftentimes when we do something, it means we kick it off. So it can be quite a cool opportunity when we choose to participate in those days. It depends on whether or not it's a campaign that's relevant to what's going on here. With this activity, obviously it was quite relevant to us because the focus was on targeting different oil villains around the world. And so different Greenpeace offices could choose the oil villain that was relative to their region. We chose OMV. And there are all of these posters created highlighting the consequences from the climate emergency. And they said, brought to you by OMV. So we took over some bus stops in Auckland, and then all of you around Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin, and across Auckland City went out with your homemade, all natural poster paste and postered all around. And it looked really good. It looked awesome. I was actually, Nick and I were speaking at a school about the climb while I was down on the South Island afterwards, and we saw posters up all over the place and stuff. We were like, oh, look at those, look at those. It was cool, exciting to see. And it was also great because during the peaceful civil disobedience trainings, we had been talking within those trainings about OMV in particular. And so people were really keen to do an activity targeting OMV. And this was the first kind of big thing that was an opportunity for them to go out on the streets and apply some of the skills that they'd learned. So it was nice having folks that hadn't been involved in something like this before go out and do postering as a consequence of, as an outcome of having attended one of the trainings and then getting more engaged. And the movement was growing because all of you in groups around the country started to get involved quite a bit. So Oil Free Wellington started holding demonstrations outside the Majestic Center again. We saw the OMV GTFO shirts, but also like placards. People were chanting, people wrote submissions, shared the petition, were handing out flyers, producing their own videos. It was awesome. It just started really kicking off everywhere. Also after the climb, Amanda and I joined Oil Free Otago, who had organized an awesome rally outside of the hotel where the EPA hearing was happening. And Amanda spoke at that hearing as well on behalf of the 5,500 people who signed on to the Greenpeace submission. And we listened to a whole bunch of activists in the community that came out and submitted as well. So yeah, it was awesome. There was quite a lot of support opposing their consents. So it's great. And OMV just sat there quietly and said nothing. And even though you weren't supposed to technically talk about climate change, some people did, and it was great because there were some really great things said. And then we went back up to Wellington again and joined about 100 of you that came out in the cold rain to serve OMV their eviction notice. So we got the 30,000 names of people that had signed on to the Evict OMV petition printed on pieces of colored paper that matched the posters that you can see that people have there and the photo that matched the banners that Nick and I put on the side of the Majestic Center when we did the climb, and put them in a fish tank and on top of a red flyer wagon. OMV, because they knew we were coming, we'd done a Facebook event. It was totally open. They sent their employees to work from home for the day, but this lovely security guy took the signatures for us and promised to deliver them to OMV on our behalf. And it was really funny because we were trying to figure out a way to make sure that there was a great visual of the amount of people that had signed on to the petition. And so the decision was to get the fish tank, which I think was Loki's decision, and strap it to this red flyer wagon. And some people were a bit skeptical. They were like, really, a fish tank? I don't know. That's going to be ridiculous. It's going to look silly. And one of our video guys was like, I don't know, man. That's going to be the money shot, that red flyer wagon with that fish tank going up the escalator. And sure enough, it was. There was this really great media photo of it like hanging off the steps of the escalator. It was going up to the second floor. So yeah, it was awesome. And we also had a meme generator, which you can see there on the right-hand side. So if people couldn't physically be in Wellington that day, they could create their own little digital banner that they could post on their Facebook page. So that's something that we try to think about a lot. We're not always very good at it. We're getting better, but we still have lots of work to do. But thinking about ways that people can be involved in an activity if they can't physically be there. And sometimes that's not possible, and it's just not one of the objectives, and it doesn't make sense given the activity. But wherever we can, we try to figure out a way for people that aren't physically there to feel like they could be a part of what we're doing and to genuinely contribute to that. So come September, we wanted to get a gauge on what people's knowledge was of OMV, because we found that there were still quite a few people that were signing kind of other climate change petitions but weren't signing the Evict OMV petition. So this survey was sent out to supporters to get some insight from them about what they do. And we used a photo from the Deepwater Horizon disaster, which is a more widely recognized photo maybe than some of the OMV ones, to get people's insights. And here's some more photos from things across the movement that you all did around the country to support the OMV campaign. And one of the things was during the Extinction Rebellion Action Camp, activists ended up going back to the Majestic building and occupied the foyer at Central Wellington. And again, OMV failed to show up for work that day. So up to this point, their strategy had basically been to be as quiet and non-reactive as possible, like probably to keep it out of the media, because anytime they would respond, obviously it would then give us another chance to talk about it and campaign on it. So they were trying to, seemed that they were trying to stay quite quiet. But come October, Mike Smith and his partner Henneke went to Austria to put some pressure on OMV on their home turf, and was ultimately supposed to meet with the CEO, but the meeting was canceled. But it was quite fantastic for him to be there on OMV's kind of on their home turf, like I said. And the Austrian office at this point had started campaigning against OMV as well. So up to this point, OMV had had quite a good reputation, evidently, in Austria. And as soon as the Austrian office started campaigning, and we also had, for instance, like one of the banners that we had, the Percy banners that Nick and I had on the wall, was German so that it could be used in the Austrian media. And at this point, the Austrian media started to pick up the campaign. And with over the course, I think the next 2 or 3 months, there was something like, it was like 70 to 100 different hits in the media about OMV drilling in New Zealand. So their social license started to plummet a bit there. Great. And then this video down here, I won't have time to show them all because we're going to run out of time, but the video down here on the left, which I'm happy to share with you all afterwards if you'd like it, is the ad that we put up on TV. That's also something that we started doing more in the last few years. It's actually making ads that play, and then people are invited to text a number. In November, we launched recruitment for and promotion for what we called the Climate Uprising. And the Climate Uprising was a range of different activities that were being organized around the country targeting OMV. So some of them were being organized by other groups, and we attended or supported, like the one in Dunedin was organized by Oil for Otago. Some were organized by student strikers, some were organized by Greenpeace volunteers and staff. It was quite a mix, which is awesome. But the one up there on the top left that you can see is the Auckland activity. That's Mission Bay. The one down on the bottom left is Wellington, and the one down in the middle there is Christchurch. But they also happened in Taranaki, in the Coromandel, and I feel like I might be missing one. There's not a photo of the Dunedin one here. I couldn't find a photo, but we had these bright pink banners that said Make OMV History that we sent out as well around the country, so all the regional activities could use those. And these activities happened over the course of like 3 weeks, basically, whenever it worked well for the people organizing. And so it meant that they could choose their day, and it also meant that people that weren't able to make arrangements to come join the blockade in Taranaki, which we at that point started promoting as well, could hopefully come to an activity in their community. There's another photo from the Wellington event on the beach there. And then in November, we had a bit of a secret activity, well, secret to folks that weren't involved directly, and that was the occupation of the Scandi Atlantic. So it was one of 2 supply vessels that the COSL Prospector had, and 27 activists got on board. This is an email that was sent out the day that it happened with a link to live updates and the live feed. And the email was sent from Magda, who was an Austrian activist that came over to join us here so that she could also speak to the Austrian media and carry the message back to Austria. And that worked really well as well, having an activist from their home country here. to get involved and talk about what's going on. So yeah, it was awesome. You see here, and you all probably saw all these photos, but folks getting ready to get on board down there on the bottom left-hand corner, you'll recognize those faces, I'm sure. Liz Palmer and all sorts down there. And then top left, you'll see an example of, again, a banner in German. It's Nick and Magda, Sienna and Layla going up the mooring line. Whole bunch of folks there on the deck with all of their bright XR banners. It was awesome. So several days on board there. It was super successful. And then some of the activists hopped in a van after getting out of jail and headed up to join the blockade in New Plymouth. So a couple of things that we did here, we wanted to keep the story, make sure the story kept going, that it all felt really connected. So Magda and Jack were two of the activists that joined the blockade in New Plymouth, and some different tweets here from them and videos down in the center photo there. They did an episode of, we started something called On the Cards. We started it in Auckland. The first session was with Luke Wejon, who was a student strike organizer at the time, and Lucy Lawless. And it was a 1 hour Facebook Live session where they asked each other different questions about climate action and activism and their own personal stories. And people watching the live stream could also write in and ask questions. And so we did a couple of those sessions throughout the course of the next few weeks. And so Magda and Jack, on the way up to the North Island, had a bit of a pit stop there on the beach and did an on the card session. And the bottom left photo, we did quite a few, had put up quite a few phantom billboards around the country and major cities as well, promoting the climate uprising. And again, had a number where people could text and get more information. So that's Jack and Magda showing off one of the posters. And then we arrived in New Plymouth, and for 3 days blockaded their office. And those of you that were involved in that know that I was there, and it was awesome. Like, I think having been involved in quite a few different blockades, like, it was just so beautiful the way it just completely took on a life of its own. And there were so many different people with their own different stories. And we had gone into the activity thinking, oh, we needed to have a lot of stuff planned because we don't want people's morale to dip. And what can we do? I was like, oh man, what can we do over the course of the 3 days? People are going to get so bored. It was not even, I don't know about you all, but I didn't feel like there was a moment of boredom. Like, there were choreos happening and singing and cricket, and it was just awesome. Like, you all brought so much life and color, and it just kept itself flowing in this beautiful way, even on days when it was cold and rainy and dreary. It was an amazing 3 days, and people of all different ages. So this was also the first time that we'd ever involved anybody under the age of 18 in an arrestable activity. We obviously went through quite an extensive process to make sure that guardians and health and safety and everything were, that we had a whole system for how we were going to make sure to keep everybody safe. But it was beautiful to have such diverse range of ages there. And another really beautiful thing was that because it was a mix of activists that were Greenpeace supporters and with all sorts of different ally groups, it meant that everybody was going out and telling the story in their own words on social media and all sorts. And yeah, it got heaps of coverage and was definitely deemed incredibly successful. You all have probably seen, I imagine, the Macarena video. If you weren't actually part of the Macarena dance, and you probably have seen the Macarena video where we left the site on that third day. That was the activists' idea. It was awesome. So there's a link to that up there too. We're going to run out of time, but it was quite fun. And then on the next day, we rolled out the Museum of Oil History. So we went back to camp the end of that third day, had a bit of a hot debrief, and said, guess what, we actually have something else planned for day 4. Who wants to hear about it? And every single person still in the room put their hand up and said, I want to be a part of it. And yeah, we spent the next wee while getting prepped to roll this guy out, which was great too, in that, you know, we'd had that 3 days in front of the office and it was quite successful. Employees couldn't come to work. OMV were, there's no doubt that they were not particularly happy about it. And they thought we were leaving, and then to come back on that 4th day, just poured some salt in the wound. So relentless, being relentless is quite a helpful tactic. Yeah, but it was great. So some key kind of learnings that we had. We have gone through quite a big evaluation process and sought feedback from activists and stuff as well to get internal and external insight about people's different experiences of the whole thing. And some key things that we learned. Obviously, we can't all do everything, but we can all do something. So I personally, as somebody who works in mobilization, a couple years ago had this very naive and completely inaccurate idea that people's engagement journey in the movement is linear. You ask them to do one thing like sign a petition, and the next natural step is you ask them to do something a bit above that, and then you ask them to do something a bit above that. Not like that at all. You'll have people that have signed, because we've done quite a bit of analysis on people that came to the trainings and came to the blockade and requested iron-ons, etc. You might have somebody that signed 12 petitions and then they decide, actually, I'm ready to put myself on the front line and risk being arrested. You might have other people that jump straight to that, or people that go from one level to another. And a lot of it obviously would have to do with, you know, geographical challenges and timing challenges and just what feels right for them at the moment and where their headspace is at. And is it the kind of tactic that really motivates and inspires them? But we realize that we need to have lots of different ways to ask people to get involved and lots of different opportunities, and allow people to choose the ones that work for them. And so that's kind of the approach that we're taking now, is let's ask a big group of people to do lots of different things, and then they get to choose which ones work, as opposed to assuming that this group of people would want to do this particular thing, because that is a false assumption. And while there was a lot of crossover between these activities, there were also a lot of people that only got engaged in one or two in particular. And that's totally great, and that's fine, but we need to provide those opportunities, otherwise they wouldn't have done anything. Never be scared to provide more information. It's really easy, all of us activists that know a lot about the issues, to assume that people know as much as we do, and they just don't. And so it never hurts to provide more context and give more explanation. And we definitely found that with OMV being a brand that wasn't a household name. Making sure that we have teams that can swap in and out. It was really fun to have activities throughout the whole year. It was quite exhausting to participate in activities throughout the whole year. So just making sure as well that you have chances for people on the teams that are working on all the different activities to take a break and do some self-care. Benefits of allowing time to tell and develop the story. I spoke about that at the beginning. It's really important, and it takes time to invest in relationship building, and there's nothing that can replace getting to know people on a more personal level like this, or face-to-face. And we definitely found that with like the peaceful civil disobedience trainings, and I have definitely found that when I meet somebody face-to-face, like it's just so much easier to feel, I think too, like a big organization like Greenpeace isn't just some random office out there, but actually is made up of real people, and just people being able to trust in individuals that they know in the organization, and individuals that we know throughout all the different groups. You know, all that connection just is so incredibly important in terms of establishing trust and confidence with each other. You need to take the time to do that, because people will show up. Heaps of people showed up. People want to get involved at different times in different ways. I spoke to that before. It's definitely not linear. You don't have to be too serious. These are serious issues that we work on, and so sometimes it can almost feel like, are you doing the issue a disservice by going out and being fun and goofy and colorful? But actually, people don't always want to hear about the apocalyptic stories, you know, that we like to tell. And I think it's definitely something that we found right now with all the heavy things happening in the world. People want to hear about the solutions and the beauty and the vision for what the world could look like, and we need to make sure that we're communicating that story too, and not just telling the story of what's wrong, because it just gets too hard to hear and then people just tune out, which is totally understandable. Passing over the mic has beautiful results. I think, and this is in regards to the trusting too, in terms of training up a whole bunch of folks around the country and just saying, you know, here are some key messages on the OMV campaign. You can totally use them if you want to, but actually if you feel comfortable, go out there and tell the story in your own words. And it ended up manifesting itself in all these beautiful personal stories. So just trusting that everybody's there for the right reason, and together we'll tell a whole of myriad of beautiful stories about why we're doing what we're doing and why it's so incredibly important. Yeah, so that's it in a nutshell. So I didn't have a chance to watch any of the videos. I'm sure you all have probably seen them multiple times anyways, but they're in the presentation if you want to view them at any point in time again. So yeah, questions. I saw some stuff, sorry, actually saw some stuff popping in the chat. I'm really bad at paying attention, being able to pay attention to the chat at the same time I'm talking. So I hope it wasn't anything super pertinent that somebody wanted an answer to right away. But
it's all good. People just wanted a link to the YouTube clip with the OMV thing, which I put in there.
oh, wicked. Okay, cool. Sweet.
It was that second link, Abby. You could chuck that in that you had on your screen towards the end there, when the pink car was in the screen.
Oh, the one of the, oh, hello, it's a Troy. The one from the Museum of Oil History, that one.
Yeah, chuck that link in, I reckon.
Yeah, sure. I can do that.
I couldn't copy and paste it off your screen, unfortunately.
That's all good. I can do it. So this is the video from when we had there are a couple actors that came that morning and did like a welcome, welcome, come one, come all, which you would remember if you were there. So that video. So there's a question about where Greenpeace are at with the current action towards OMV. The short answer is we will keep an eye out on any future plans to come back and drill. They did find something in the Great South Basin. They have permits, so there's a chance that they could come back. They're not here now doing that drilling, obviously, but they could come back. However, for them to come back, it would need to be, one, financially viable for them to do so. It's incredibly expensive, and obviously quite a long ways from their home turf to get here. And one of the other challenges when you've only got, and this is one of the big reasons why we put so much effort into the OMV campaign last year, is that up until last year, there were a whole bunch of other companies that over the course of the last decade were still coming here to drill. And so what oil companies would typically do is they get together and say a group of 3 of them, and then they can share the costs across all of their companies in terms of the equipment, et cetera, because it's so incredibly expensive to come so far to drill. But every time one of those oil companies pulls out, it makes it exponentially more expensive for the other one. So with OMV being the only one left, like it's already quite unappealing for them. Really, you would think so, because of the incredible financial burden that it carries. So we were like, man, if we can tip these guys over, then who's going to want to come back, especially when we now have a ban on any new oil and gas offshore oil exploration permits. You know, there's not like this long industry livelihood to be had here with that ban. So, you know, we wanted to just show how unappealing it would be. So yeah, so we're keeping an eye, and then also, of course, what's happening with the global pandemic too would have to, next summer when it's drilling season again, it would have to be circumstances that make sense for them to come back. So we'll keep an eye on it, but it's not where we're focusing heaps of attention right now. Also because of just what's happening, the reality is the green and just COVID response work and the regenerative agriculture work is they're such pertinent areas for us to be focusing time and attention, especially when OMV's not planning to drill here in the near future, and hopefully won't, but we'll just keep an eye. Yeah, we'll keep an eye and an ear to the ground so that we know what's happening.
Abby, is there a chance that National might reverse that and re-allow new permits out at sea?
So they have said numerous times that they would. However, it could be political suicide for them to do that. I mean, basically, we want kind of the same thing to happen with the oil and gas ban as happened with the ban on nuclear, and that even when there was a change in government, like New Zealanders were so behind us being nuclear free that it would have been such an unpopular choice. And we're hoping that basically the tone in New Zealand has changed so much that it wouldn't be to their benefit because they'd get such backlash. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, they talk the talk, but whether or not they'd actually do it, I don't know. But it's definitely something we're paying attention to and something to look out for if there is a change in government at the end of this year, which hopefully there won't be. Nonpartisan speaking, but just in terms of, like who's good on the, yeah, I think we probably are all on the same page in that we're not super keen on seeing National back in office again. Anybody else have questions?
Well, just one more question. You mentioned regenerative agriculture. I watched a Country Calendar episode about 4 weeks ago. I was really impressed by the guy down south who has adopted it, and it just seems like a miracle solution to our agricultural problems. And so are you saying that Greenpeace is pushing that hard?
Yeah, we are. So one of our big asks at the moment is for some of the $20 billion that the government still has to invest to go into fund to support regenerative agriculture. So we're asking for $1 billion to be invested in that to support farmers that want to switch their practices. So yeah, it's a huge emphasis for us is pushing that. And also been doing quite a bit of work, not me personally, I'm not on the agriculture team, but those on the agriculture team have been doing quite a bit of work to reaching out to the regenerative agriculture community and farmers just to get some of their insight and kind of create some networks there, because there are people, like you said, a couple people have mentioned that. I haven't actually watched that Country Calendar episode, but I've heard it's really good. And so many people that have switched that have said, actually, my product now is so much better and I'm so much better off in terms of kind of the sustainability of my farm. And obviously it's the better choice for the environment, hands down. So, but too many farmers are in a situation where they're in so much debt and stuff, they need government support to be able to make that transition. So that's part of what we would want that regenerative agriculture fund to go towards. And there's a question here from Lisa around solutions that we're putting forward that would replace oil. I mean, in terms of solutions, the one that we're talking about more and going to be talking about more, I think this year, is more investment in solar. It's an area where Greenpeace or New Zealand just has not tapped into its potential at all. And also, as we're talking about what a green and just recovery looks like, we realize that we also need to make sure that we've got some really key solutions that we can focus on that don't feel dense like a big report can, and solar is one of the obvious ones. So we've got a solar petition already, and we're probably going to be doing more work. And there was also quite a bit of discussion around, for instance, like putting more pressure on Megan Woods around solar for all this housing they plan to build.
Yeah, but I mean, as in something that serves the same purpose as oil. Oil's like a lubricant. Solar isn't going to actually replace a lubricant. You see what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean, like, I know we've got wind, we've got solar, we've got lots of solutions on that level, but what can actually be a replacement for oil? And is research being done by Greenpeace on anything, or has there been research done by anybody that can replace it instead of us having to go to the ends of the frickin' earth and put everything at risk?
Jason, do you have a response to that?
I don't really know, but I've heard this argument. There are veggie-based oils. I don't know if if you can use them. I imagine you could use anything that's an oil is a lubricant, as long as it's a decent quality oil. I haven't, I don't know this for a fact, but that could possibly be an option, yeah. To take it away from petrochemical-based lubricant. I'm guessing.
Yeah, they may face things like deforestation and stuff like that as well, though, eh?
I mean, to answer your question in terms of what Greenpeace is doing, like no, there's not research, and we're not doing research into what specifically could replace oil. And I think there's also, like, we don't claim to be experts on specifically what all the solutions should be either, right? Like, so we see our role as kind of advocating for a change and promoting the need for a change, but it doesn't mean, and it's the same thing when it comes to any campaign, we're not going to be experts in all those areas, and so therefore we're not going to be able to say this is a step-by-step process by which we should shift, but there are experts out there, and the money and the resource needs to be put into developing those alternatives. And so it's putting the pressure on corporations and government to invest in those alternatives that is the role, as opposed to us being able to say, this is how you actually just replace one with the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And lubrication oil doesn't get burnt. I mean, a small amount of it gets burnt when it's heated up and things, but it's not such a contributor to climate change. Obviously, anything that takes out the petrochemical industry, including the production of plastics, is a good thing to stop. But yeah, and there's lots of different oil sources out there. There's vegetable oils, like Jason was saying, and Katja just talked about mineral-based oils, and there are lots of lubricants out there already in use that aren't petrochemical based.
Right. So that would stop the need to go and drill.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of lubrication, there's enough oil already around to lubricate things for years, but there's a lot of vegetable-based oils that are coming into the marketplace for engine lubrication and all sorts. But you don't want the internal combustion engine anyway, so you don't want so much lubricating oil in the first place. So replace the internal combustion engine. You don't need that much lubrication. Your bike chain. I've got vegetable oil on my bike chain. Chainsaw chain, the chain bars. It's all good.
Yeah, I use it for massaging and everything as well. Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah. I'm glad you've transitioned from engine oil to sesame oil for your massaging, Lisa.
Yeah, I had to. Greenpeace was putting such pressure on me, man. It was bad. Thanks, guys. Thanks for answering.
No worries. So we're over time now. I think there was one more, there's two more questions, but they kind of probably can be summed up in one. In regards to your question specifically, Jason, around how much drilling onshore is happening in the Taranaki area, I don't know, but I could ask Amanda, who was climate campaigner on that campaign, so she would know more than I would specifically about that. And then Mike, your question about the consents in the Maui field, kind of same thing in regards to what I said earlier about just keeping an eye on OMV's work, but we don't know for sure that they'll take these consents up. No, they might not. Oh, and Joanne.
There for a moment. So I do know a little bit about this. The Maui stuff, they're going to side drill into a field that they've already been working on. So I don't think it's actually really new exploration. They're just going to try and make that existing field last for longer, basically. And yes, they are still doing onshore oil and gas here, and that will probably go on for some time, I would think. There's quite a few different companies working here, not just OMV. So I guess the big concern was, well, for me anyway, was really the deep sea drilling. That seemed like the most dangerous thing to me and the most important thing to try and stop. But a lot of what is in Taranaki is actually gas, not oil. So they've mostly found gas here, and most of the production here is gas. But when they look for these things, they always look for both, because they come out of similar geological kind of things, from what I understand.
Yeah. Thanks, Joanna. Joanna's our local Taranaki insider. It's awesome. Thank you.
Hey,
Wonderful.
I'm just popping into the link, the schedule for the rest of the online sessions we're doing. Feel free to grab that, and I'll also pop in our email address, which you've probably all got by now. You're all familiar faces to this, but I'll pop it in anyway. So if you've got any further questions or suggestions or anything you want to talk to us about, you just go ahead and send us an email. Sends or Holly or Abby will get back to you.
And in terms of next week, we might end up actually having, not having a session on Wednesday, but maybe having one on Saturday. We're still trying to confirm a couple people we've asked to speak for next week about the Black Lives Matter movement and everything that's happening with that at the moment. And then we've got speakers booked for the 2 weeks after that. So Simon Osterman, for those of you that know him, is going to be doing a session on communications, and Kate, who was a climate campaigner with us and is also a lawyer, is going to be doing a session on legals too. So that's what's coming up in the next few weeks. But we'll keep you all posted. We'll continue to send out emails about the sessions as they come up. So I will let all of you know, or Sens will let all of you know about what's happening next week. So stay tuned. I'll let you know when we're
Nice.
cool.
Well, I'd like to thank Abby, our guest, who's normally our host, filling a different shoes today.
He's not
For
a guest.
coming
I'm like
along.
a piece of furniture at this point, but thanks.
Yes. You can give yourself the guest present later on that you're organising for the guests. And I'd like to thank you all for bringing your time on a Saturday afternoon to come along to this, and your thoughts and your comments and your presence. Much appreciated. And look forward to seeing you all on some other thing, and look forward to seeing you on this journey. And see you all soon. Ka
Thank you
kite
very
ono.
Kite. Thanks, Abby. Awesome.
Thank you very
Have a
much.
fantastic rest of your
Thank you,
weekend,
Abby.
everybody. Thank you. Nice to see you all.
Thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Yeah.
Thank you,
Awesome.
everyone.
Sure.
Thank you. And thank you for all of your work on the campaign last year. Yeah. Cool. All right.
Me.
I'm going to go do my letter E.
I'm going to go do my W, which is like an E, but the other way around.
Sorry, Tom's leaving. Hold on.
Push the
Okay.
leave button, Lisa.
It's
Good to
not,
see you,
it's
Lisa.
gone. Bye.
Oh. See ya.
Bye. Are you
Hey,
doing,
Abby.
you're gonna, yeah.
Yeah, I have to drive my car and then because he's given me one that's miles away as well, over by past St Heliers by Karaka Bay. It's all good. You might want to what are you using for sound? Because you're cutting in and out a little bit.
Was I?
Yeah. Are you on the computer or are you?
I'm on the computer, but you know what? Usually I use my headphones and I didn't have them in because I'm in my
Yeah,
room,
right.
but that's probably why I didn't think about that.